Welcome to today's show, Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess, passionate, inspirational speaker, author, poet, and entrepreneur. Good morning, and welcome to Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm delighted that you joined me today. I want to give a big thank you to those of you who are listening today, and a big shout out to all of you listening around the world. I'm delighted and so grateful that you tuned in. I sure hope you're enjoying a fabulous day today and that you're having a fantastic week, because you know what? In the grand song of the universe, life is very short. It's short, sweet, and very, very precious. So I hope you're making a difference in your own life, because when you do, you also make a difference in someone else's life. Now, a lot of folks want to make their life count for something, don't they? And they ask me, Dr. Gloria, how do you do that? Well, it's very simple, really simple. You make your life count day by day, step by step, moment by moment, every single day, 365, 24/7. That's what Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count is all about. Now, you can learn more about Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count by visiting the Gloria Burgess website. That's GloriaBurgess.com. The Gloria Burgess website. Again, that's GloriaBurgess.com, or by visiting Facebook. Facebook.com/DR for Dr. DR GloriaBurgess/PhD/. Okay, I have a very special show for you today. Today's podcast is a celebration of poetry. Now, here in the United States, we celebrate poetry all month long during the month of April, which is quite wonderful for poets and for the rest of us. But you know me, I love to celebrate poetry anytime, anywhere, and with anyone, including you. So today, that's exactly what we'll do, celebrate. We will celebrate poetry. Now, you've heard me say this before. I love language. I love the music of it, the melody and rhythm and cadence of words. I also love language because words are so full of power and wonder and awe and mystery. Words are full of presences, the presences of space and time and people and places, the presences of smells and tastes and touch and memory. Words can be magical, mystical. Words can bless or blaspheme. Words can be a healing balm or hurt like the sting of cold ice pelting against your skin. In fact, words really do have vitality, right? And soul. Words can make a difference. When we're distressed, depressed, when we despair. Now, how can that be? Because words can offer light, lucidity, illumination, and they can also bring a certain kind of loveliness into our world. So let's talk about light. The focus of today's show is all about poetry and light. Now, I've been a poet for a long, long time. In fact, I've written several books of poems, and my poems are published in a number of anthologies. Over the years, I've developed a deep appreciation for poetry, and I now know that poems can be a resource for people in any setting, any context where people are. And that would be just about everywhere, right? So these days, I share poetry in schools, in healthcare settings, in church, in corporate settings, in IT. I share poems with government officials, with first responders like firefighters and police officers and EMTs. I share poems with financial analysts, social workers, with families and children in foster care, and with other artists. The power of poetry to renew, restore, revive, rejuvenate, to inspire, and to help people imagine new possibilities. You know what? The power of poetry is positively amazing. So again, what I'll share today is all about poetry and light. In many ways, the poems that I'll share today reflect and mirror the many threads of my life and work. In fact, you've heard me talk about many of these threads and themes right here on this show. The themes of gratitude, faith, love, creativity, imagination, integrity, hope, and possibility. Before we dive into the podcast, I want to take just a moment to welcome you. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Dr. Gloria, and this is Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'd like to extend a special welcome to those of you who are joining my podcast, or if you're joining Talk Network Radio for the very first time. I'm so excited to have you listening in today, and I'm deeply honored that you've allowed me to be part of your day so you can be inspired by ideas and resources to make your life count. Today's program is all about poetry and light, and this is an invitation to you to just slow down, to be still for the next half hour or so at least, right? This is an invitation to you to be attentive, to tune into and simply revel and rejoice in the music of your soul. You are in for a very special treat. Poetry invites us to pay attention. And to pay attention, we need to slow down. Now, you don't want to miss a single word of this podcast. So, I'm going to invite you to grab your earbuds, find yourself a comfortable sofa or chair to relax in. Make sure you have a nice cool glass of water next to you or a cup of wonderful tea or coffee. We're going to have a great time. Now notice today I didn't say grab your walking shoes, right? Okay, this is all about chilling, all about slowing down. Okay, let's walk into the wondrous light of poetry. The first poem today is a beautiful one by Langston Hughes, one of my favorite poets. This poem is called Mother to Son. Mother to Son. Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor. Bare. But all the time, I've been a-climbing on, and reaching landings and turning the corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now, for I still going, honey. I still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. I just love how Langston Hughes uses the image of crystal stair. When I see that crystal stair, I see the luminous beauty of light. Now, the poet uses the notion of dark, the opposite of light. He uses the dark so that the light of that crystal stair is emphasized. The light is heightened all the more. Estrus Tucker, my friend and one of my mentors, talks about this poem in this way. Estrus says, "My life is held by the love of a mother who, despite limited opportunities and deferred dreams, dared to believe, care, and act for the sake of her soul and the soul of her children and community." He goes on to say, "The humble language of mother to son speaks to me in times of failure and disillusionment, as well as times of accomplishments and acceptance. As an organizer and facilitator, I often find my best work happens when the meeting is over." I know that's right. In his work as an organizer and facilitator, Estrus once hosted a series of meetings of Central City, Fort Worth neighbors to share ideas and to improve their community. He says, "The ground rules were simple. Be kind, listen well, and speak from the heart. We focused on two questions. The first question was, what kind of place do I dream? What kind of place do I dream of for those I love? And the second question was, what do I love doing?" Great questions, right? After people read and reflected on their responses, which were posted on the wall, I invited them to speak about what they had felt inspired to do. A community garden, voter registration rallies, predatory lending protests, and a neighborhood association all grew from those simple conversations. I remember a young man saying, "When people listened to me, I felt like I was somebody worth hearing. When people trusted me, I felt trustworthy. When you open your heart first and then open your eyes, you see people and places differently. We had many gifts. We just didn't see them. Seeing these people take action, I don't turn back, but dare to believe, to care, and to act just as my mother did, taking on life as she found it." I'm going to read once again that luminous poem, Mother to Son, by Langston Hughes. "Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I've been a-climbing on, and reaching landings, and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So, boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps, 'cause you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now. For I still going, honey. I still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. You know what? When I think about this poem, I too think about my own mother, the journey she's had, the steps she had to climb into the light beyond being in the world of belonging to and being a sharecropper's daughter. I also think of my father. His life was certainly no crystal stair. Now, some of you have heard me share my father's story on this podcast, and maybe even in other settings. My father was the first person in his family to go to college, the first person in his family who dared to dream about such a thing as that. In fact, when he was just a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, he talked about 2 of his dreams. He wanted to live in a house with running water and to go to college. Now, in the 1930s, in the deep south of the United States, in rural Mississippi, these were big, bad, audacious dreams, especially for a little black boy. Talking about dreams like these could actually get you killed. But that didn't faze my father. He talked to anybody who would listen. Yes, he did. It didn't matter what you looked like, how old you were, what walk of life you came from. My father passionately talked about his dreams. As a young man, he worked as a janitor at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. Now, this was in the 1950s. So he could work there, but he couldn't attend college there. Why? Because Ole Miss was still segregated. This was before the Civil Rights Movement, which would be about a decade later. So my father is still talking about his dreams to anybody who would listen, the students, the professors, the staff, anybody who would listen, right? Well, one day, all of that would change. One of the administrators at Ole Miss heard about my dad and heard about his dream of going to college. That gentleman met my father and asked him about his dreams. He fell in love with my father. That gentleman was responsible for introducing my dad to the person who would change his life, who would change my family's life for all time. And that person was Pulitzer Prize-winning American author and Nobel laureate William Faulkner. Now, when Faulkner met my father, he was deeply touched by my dad's faith, passion, drive, determination, humility, gratitude, and leadership. Faulkner didn't see my father the way that many whites saw my dad. Now, in those days, my father was viewed as a black man who was way too big for his britches, so to speak. But Faulkner didn't see him that way. Instead, he saw my father the way that God saw him. He saw my father as a man with birthright dignity. He saw my father's humanity and divinity. He saw my father as a man filled with love, light, possibility, and generosity. And that's exactly how my father viewed himself. And that's how my father also viewed Faulkner, as another human being, another man, filled with love, light, possibility, and generosity of spirit. Now, Faulkner offered to pay for my father to attend college, to pay for his tuition, his room and board, his books, with no strings attached. Wow. Pretty amazing, right? Well, what would you do? I mean, what would you do? What would you say if somebody offered you something like that? I mean, this was my dad's lifelong dream. What do you think he said? Well, he said, no. No, sir. I want to go to college more than anything, but I can't accept your generous offer. You see, I don't know how I could ever pay you back. And Faulkner looked at my dad with a twinkle in his eye, and he said, I don't expect you to pay me back. You just pass this blessing on when you're able to do so. Mercy. I mean, who knew? How many of you know that God looks out for his own? That fall, my father enrolled at Alcorn A&M College with my mom, me, and my two older sisters right by his side. So, my father's and my family's story. Not long ago, this story came through in words and images, and this amazing story that I just shared is now available as a children's picture book, as a visual biography that is a great book for people of all ages. Now, before the picture book, before the visual biography, before the words and images of a storybook came through, God gave me the same story, the same arc, but he gave it to me in words and images and light and in the form of a poem. And I want to share that poem with you now. So I shared the story with you, so hopefully it will bring more light into the poem for you. The poem is called Sanctuary. Sanctuary. For my father, Ernest McEwen Jr., and William Faulkner. Between the brush of angels' wings and furious hooves of hell, two mortal men fell down. How you must have looked. White shirt stained, khakis fatigued, smelling of sweat and smoke, hair at odds with itself and the world. At the threshold, among your restless dead, in echo and shadow of ancient oaks, providing sanctuary, offering shade. You had many worlds behind you, few yet to be born. Stories of insurgence, scorn, decay, theme and variations of a vanquished South. Leaning against a jam of antebellum brass, you watched, waited, raised weary arm and hand, saluted the familiar stranger. Come, come, enter, sit, sing. You reached each other across the grate. What you two must have known of heaven and hell. I can picture the home where Faulkner lived, and it's like a light as you walk up this long red brick pathway. The house is painted still white, And so in the pathway up to the house, you see this bright light of white in the paint, in the house, in the presences that guard the home, these ancient trees, these old trees lining the walkway. So the poem talks about the old, ancient qualities in the house, leaning against a jamb, a door jamb, leaning against a jamb of antebellum brass. You watched, waited, raised weary arm and hand, saluted the familiar stranger. Come, enter, sit, sing. You reached each other across the grate. What you two must have known of heaven and hell. So I'm going to read this poem again in its entirety, and this time I just want to invite you to listen keenly for the different qualities of light that appear in the poem. You know, we start out with the brush of angel's wings, which is a certain quality of light, right? And then the furious hooves of hell, which brings on another entirely different kind of quality of light, right? So listen, please, as you hear me again, as you hear this poem on my breath. Listen for the different qualities of light and how they play into and off of one another. Sanctuary. For my father, Ernest McEwen Jr., and William Faulkner. Between the brush of angels' wings and furious hooves of hell, two mortal men fell down. How you must have looked, white shirt stained, khakis fatigued, smelling of sweat and smoke, hair at odds with itself and the world. At the threshold, among your restless dead, in echo and shadow of ancient oaks, providing sanctuary, offering shade. You had many worlds behind you, few yet to be born. Stories of insurgence, scorn, decay, theme and variations of a vanquished South. Leaning against a jamb of antebellum brass, you watched, waited, raised weary arm and hand, saluted the familiar stranger. Come, enter, sit, sing. You reached each other across the grate. What you two must have known of heaven and hell. Deciding on who you will invite to enter, sit, and sing. Deciding on who you include or exclude is a choice. Deciding who you stand with and who you don't. Deciding who you see and who you choose to ignore. All of these are choices. I love this quote by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She says, "People are like stained glass windows. They sparkle and shine when the sun is out. But when the darkness sets in, their true beauty is revealed only if there is a light from within." Now, I love this quote, so I'm going to repeat it. And the first time I had to kind of stop to really get my head around it. So listen. People are like stained glass windows. They sparkle and shine when the sun is out. But when the darkness sets in, and the darkness could be hard times or social expectation or anything else that wants to creep in and suck the light right out of you, right? When the darkness sets in, their true beauty is revealed only if there is a light from within. And you know what? When there is a light from within, it does not matter. Listen to me. It does not matter what people around you do. The only thing that matters is who you are and whose you are. Because when you know whose you are, who you choose to be is very easy. It's very easy. And it will determine who you choose to be and what you choose to do. All right. So just invite you to breathe, breathe, breathe. And I have another poem that I'd like to share with you. And this next poem is all about artists and artistry. When I saw the title, On Gathering Artists, I was immediately drawn to it. Then I read the poem, and I was drawn in even further. As I just mentioned, this poem is all about artists and artistry and the light we can bring into the world and illuminate the world through our own creative genius. Now, you know that I think that we're all artists. Some of us are artists with a big A, right? But we're all artists. So this poem is a wonderfully luscious poem by Alberto Rios, On Gathering Artists. Is totally new to me, and the poet is actually new to me as well. So Rios was born in 1952. He lives in Arizona, and he is the inaugural poet laureate of the state of Arizona. Early in his writing life, he received the Walt Whitman Award for his collection of poems called Whispering to Fool the Wind. Whispering to Fool the Wind. Rios has written many, many poems and has authored a number of poetry collections, including A Small Story About the Sky. He currently serves as a chancellor of the prestigious Academy of American Poets. Here's his poem, On Gathering Artists. Rios begins this poem with an epigraph. Who does a job well, and very well? These are the artists, those curious lights. We are cobblers of the song, and barkers of the carnival word. We are tailors of the light, and framers of the earth. We fish among the elements and hunt the elusive green in gray and blue. We drink forbidden waters and eat an invisible food. In this time of electronic mail and facsimile conversation, we send our voice, the poem, the bridge, the circuit, the cure, whose electricity is made from dreams, whose song is sung in the colors yet unnamed, drawn from the solitary etudes of the soul, and given up in tender to the world. How easy to spend a day writing a poem. How hard to spend a life writing 1,000. A poem, a bridge, a story, a circuit, cures, laws, bowls, the warp and weave and waft of iron and paper and light and salt. We labor for a lifetime, but take every day off. Who knows what to make of us? We are not the rib cage, but the legs. We are not the steering wheel, but the headlamps. We gather happily, if not often. We can't sit still. We hurry off. Goodbye to us. Hello to us. A tip of the hat to us as we go about the drumming of our stars. On gathering artists. Who does a job well and very well? These are the artists, those curious lights. We are cobblers of the song and barkers of the carnival word. We are tailors of the light and framers of the earth. We fish among the elements and hunt the elusive green in gray and blue. We drink forbidden waters and eat an invisible food. In this time of electronic mail and facsimile conversation, we send as our voice the poem, the bridge, the circuit, the cure, whose electricity is made from dreams, whose song is sung in the colors yet unnamed, drawn from the solitary etudes of the soul, and given up in tender to the world. How easy to spend a day writing a poem. How hard to spend a life writing 1,000. A poem, a bridge, a circuit, a story, cures, laws, bowls, the warp and weave and waft of iron, and paper and light and salt. We labor for a lifetime, but take every day off. Who knows what to make of us? We are not the rib cage, but the legs. We are not the steering wheel, but the headlamps. We gather happily, if not often. We can't sit still. We hurry off. Goodbye to us. Hello to us. A tip of the hat to us as we go about the drumming of our stars. Such lustrous poems. These poems of light and love and soul. If you'd like to read more, you can find each of the poems I share today in books by the poets Langston Hughes, Alberto Rios, and yours truly, Gloria Burgess. In fact, you can find my poem, Sanctuary, in my book of poems called The Open Door. It also appears in a number of anthologies and in my book called Dare to Wear Your Soul on the Outside. You can hear more about the power of poetry by listening to some of my other podcasts. I have a show about poetry and the power of healing, poetry and leading, another one that highlights and features Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Gwendolyn Brooks. I also have a podcast of my interview with poet Elizabeth Austin and a show featuring Dr. Maya Angelou. And yes, I know that folks love my podcasts on poetry, and I love researching and creating them, so there's more to come. More podcasts about the power of words and the power of poetry. Now, did you know that you can offer poetry anywhere? That's right. You can offer poetry anywhere. In fact, during National Poetry Month, they now have a whole day called Poem in Your Pocket. Poem in Your Pocket. What does that mean? Well, it's a whole day where the idea is to tuck a copy of your favorite poem into your pocket or your purse or your backpack, right? And then you share your poem with folks you encounter during your day, on the bus, in your carpool, when you're walking your dog, or standing in line waiting for your coffee or latte or tea, when you're at work or at the grocery store or the bookstore, the fruit stand. You get the idea, right? I just love that. Poem in your pocket. And you know what? I want to let you in on a little secret, okay? But this is the kind of secret you can share with others. So what's the secret? Well, here it is. You don't have to wait until Poem in Your Pocket Day to share poetry. That's right. You don't have to wait. You can share a poem anytime, anywhere, with anyone. Okay? Just give it a try. Now, in my own work as a speaker, as a coach, as a facilitator and trainer, I use poems all the time, right? I use poems to help people slow down, to bring them into a room, to help them remember to breathe, right? And to help them remember who they are and to remember who and what is important. I use poems to build bridges. I use poems to help people reconnect with their purpose and sometimes to find their way, right? To find their unique purpose, their why. I use poems to heal, to inspire, to transcend ordinary time, to enter through the gates of God's time, what the Greeks called kairos. Used in these ways, poems become prayers. Poems become prayers. Poems also become a portal, a doorway, a threshold that we cross that urges us to stop, look, and listen, to truly pay attention to who and what matters. Now just think about this. If you want to transform your relationships or your family, your friendships, your team at work, your organization, guess what? You first have to transform yourself. And one of the best ways I know is to do that through poetry. To allow yourself to stop, look, and listen, spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, and physically. How you live is how you do everything. How you live is how you lead yourself, your relationships, your friendships, at work, at home, at church, with your kids, your parents, your sisters and brothers. Ask yourself, how am I living today? Not how am I doing today, but how am I living today? Okay. If you missed any part of this week's podcast, or if you missed last week's show, you can download the recording and listen to it at your convenience. You can even listen to it on the go. Check us out at iTunes, Alexa, Spreaker.com, or you can listen live or download to listen later right here at www.talknetworkradio.com. Okay? That's www.talknetworkradio.com. All right. We are about to close today's podcast, and I want to thank each of you for tuning in today. Thank you for allowing me to share a bit about my journey with what legacy living is all about. Not just living and learning, but living and learning and serving so that you make a difference in your own life and in the lives of others. It's all about being on purpose every single day, 365, 24/7. Legacy living is one of the many ways to make your life count. Before I close today's show, again, I want to thank you for joining me here today. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess, and this has been Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. Please join me again next week right here on iTunes, Alexa, Spreaker.com, or Talk Network Radio for another show, another podcast of Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. Don't just count the days in your life. Make the days in your life count. That's what legacy living is all about. Have a fantastic day, and remember, make the days in your life count. God bless. That's our show today. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess. I hope you'll join me again next week. Until then, don't just count the days in your life. Make the days in your life count. That's what legacy living is all about. Here's to you. Have a fantastic day. Be sure to make it a yes kind of day. And remember, celebrate. Celebrate the music of your life. Make the days in your life count.